All right, so we are very excited to have Dr. Cronick with us today. Dr. Nancy Cronick coordinates the Rutgers University Library and Information Science Master's Program and teaches intellectual freedom, community engagement, and information policy, classes enhanced by her years of professional service leading research libraries and serving as president of the American Library Association with a focus on libraries and democracy. As a career-long proponent of open access to information and the catalytic role of libraries in the advancement of democracy, Cronick has sustained research in these and related topics, which has distinguished her as a leading contributor to the literature of the field of library and information science, as well as a prominent advocate for the civic role of libraries around the world. So now I will hand it off to Dr. Cronick. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Let's see here. Thank you. Can you see my slides?
Yes, I can see them, but you'll probably have to put them in the presentation mode.
Right, we're getting
Okay.
okay, good. We've had to start everything over again all day, so okay. So let's see here. Now, how do I get rid of my pictures of people? Can I do that? That people showing up on my screen so I can see my screen. So
There might be a little icon that's like a line, and I think if you click the line, it will kind of minimize the pictures. Do you mean the pictures of like
um,
Sophie
yeah,
and I?
sure,
Or you can kind of move, you can move it. You can like move it up to the top.
okay, great. That does it. Thanks. Whoops. Okay. So, so thank you so much, Claire. I've really enjoyed hearing more about NC Live. They've talked to me about me, but I haven't heard about you. So this has been great. So I'm absolutely delighted to be a part of NC Live annual conference, Libraries and Democracy. I didn't think I'd, after all these years, have a conference named after a book I wrote. So I'm really pleased to be part of it. As you're probably aware, this topic is near and dear to my heart, and your interest in this particular juncture, at this particular juncture in our 250th anniversary year, makes it especially appreciated. So, before we get started, I'm curious as to what you think about when you hear the term civic culture. In a word or phrase, can you indicate what comes to mind? And Sophie, I'm not sure how you're going to get them to input this question, but okay, perfect. We have our first poll. So we'll give you maybe 20 seconds to just put in the first word that comes to mind. And what did you think when you saw that I was going to speak on this particular topic? This is a concept we'll pick up as my talk goes on. So, okay. So, do we want to see results now or can we wait?
I think it will, well, would you like me to hold off on showing the results?
Let's see just a few results. I'll see what kind of input we're getting. So,
All right, okay. Can you all see this if you click view details? It has made a little word cloud.
oh, fantastic, but I can't see it.
1 second.
Oh,
Do
so
you,
can you give us some highlights?
Via Zoom.
yes, happy to give some highlights. It looks like the biggest word on here is community,
Oh,
followed
great.
by democracy, voting, engagement, politics, responsibility. And then there's some smaller words as well. Um, shared, government, members, involvement, public good, political, American.
Wow, perfect. So you all get an A in my class. That's perfect. So, okay. So, I'm going to bring you now to my town in New Jersey. So, in November 2024, so about a year and a half ago, you probably remember that month well. my local public library in Highland Park, New Jersey, reopened to great fanfare after a major renovation. Now, on my way walking to the opening, and I might add, I am now the president of the library board. I was just a member of the library board at the time. I was wondering, was anybody going to show up for this opening? Why? Because A, we had just had 5 days before the opening, a very contentious election. Would people even want to go out and celebrate? And several years of closures after COVID shutdowns, and then we reopened and we had a hurricane. Just like North Carolina, New Jersey has hurricanes. And we had severe damage. We finally got cleaned up after that 8 months. We reopened and we got notified by the state library that we got a renovation grant. So we had to close again. So, to my great relief, though, 1,500 residents showed up out of a town of 15,000. So, I know Claire's better at math than I am this morning, but that's a pretty good number of people who showed up. And I might add that every age, every color, everybody showed up, including lots of kids who were eager to see our new fire engine that came as well. So here I am with the state librarian, with the mayor, with all kinds of public officials who actually fought to get on the podium to claim this wonderful moment. So indeed, the occasion elicited overwhelming joy from local citizens. After many closures, our library's reopening allowed us to reimagine not only our space, but also our civic role in the community, because we had to establish that in a very different way while we were closed. We had to get out into that community, and I'm so glad community is the #1 word you all chose, because I'm going to talk about it a lot today. In short, the library has taken its rightful civic path on the front line of advancing democracy and elevating the role of citizens in our community. But weeks later, we also welcomed, you could say, to our newly opened library, a book banner. Disruptive, a notorious patron named Christo, who showed up in mask. He visited the library initially objecting to the young adult award-winning book, Genderqueer. Staff courteously responded and gave him our newly revised selection policy and reconsideration form. But he refused to fill it out. So we weren't really in a position to move forward with reconsidering what he had requested we remove from the collection. And then days later, he returned with another man and asked us to also ban this book as gay. Now, we had heard he might come to our January board meeting, but he didn't show up at our board meeting. Instead, he went to the Borough Council and read probably the most offensive passage he could find in one of these books. So it was pretty shocking to everybody in the community. So what happened? So here's what happened. When the Court of Public Opinion came to the Highland Park Public Library's board meeting a month later. Now, I might add, it was my first meeting as board president. We were alerted that afternoon that the book banners might show up for the February meeting. And so staff and trustees got on the phone and connected with all of these groups in town that they had built relations with while we were closed, because we turned outward. We didn't have our building, so we got involved in the community. So on very short notice, more than 75 people showed up at our meeting, but the book banners failed to come, or they saw all these people and maybe backed off. So what did people say? We allowed all of them to talk. It was just a spectacular testimony to how important our library is to our community. One person, Jeff, expressed strong support for the actions of the library and its employees. He stated he has faith in the library's discretion in the selection of materials. Another, Chelsea, thanked the library for promoting materials for youth that provide windows and mirrors into the experiences of others and hopes this will continue. And finally, Jorge proposed the principle that no one has the right to tell anyone what we or our children should read, and noted that the library is everyone in this room. Clearly, during the shutdown, we showed up for the community, and afterwards, the community showed up for us. Building those relationships in our community made such a big difference, not only when we celebrated our reopening, but also when we needed the community to step forward. We found we could disagree without being disagreeable. So, in this recent article, two civic scholars, Peter Levine and Dana Cunningham, stated, learning to disagree well is also a civic act. Organizations that create conditions for constructive dissent help sustain democratic habits. Indeed, a central district of deficit of contemporary democracy is a widespread failure to embrace productive dissent and deliberation within civic and political culture. With a deliberate approach and the right tools, leaders and their teams can transform conflict into the kind of constructive disagreement a healthy civic environment requires. They can foster ongoing negotiation, mutual recognition, and shared agreement on what to do despite areas of disagreement. Indeed, this article just came out, and I thought it really captured well how we might rethink how to think about conflict that we also may be experiencing in our communities. So 25 years ago, Robert Putnam published Bowling Alone. I'm sure some of you are very familiar with this book. And he also came to ALA as my presidential speaker. It was just extraordinary listening to this man right after he published this book. He carefully documented how Americans have become less engaged in civic and social life, including joining organizations, attending meetings, having backyard barbecues, and socializing with friends and family. As this bowling alone metaphor highlights, and this is him actually in the picture, he's the guy in the middle, his bowling league. While individual participation in activities like bowling may remain steady or increase, the collective social aspect of the league has withered. Putnam saw this decline in what he called social capital, weakening the social fabric of society, negatively affecting physical and civic health, trust, and the ability to solve collective problems. Today, these threats to our democracy have ranked among the most important issues facing Americans. And in a recent interview, Putnam updated his earlier findings by saying, today, things have only gotten worse. So in the last 25 years, since I've been paying close attention to these issues, they've gotten worse, not better. But democracy needs libraries to engage in our civic life of our communities and bring them together. So last week, the Christian Science Monitor published this article called The Library's New Chapter, Reimagining a Role as America's Community Glue. A different way to think about community. And in the article, the director of the library in Sharon, Massachusetts, Robert Gagne, says of his library, what people need most is connection and access. It's the library that brings people together, just like it did in Highland Park. It's bringing people together all around the country, and I'm sure many of you could have been the star of this article. So why libraries? Well, because libraries are probably what you're thinking, boundary spanners, catalytic, conveners, trusted, safe, and brave, I might add, spaces. Neutral for everyone, we're inclusive, rooted in the community, we're capacity builders, and also we advocate for individual intellectual freedom. We're places that Ray Oldenburg, the author of The Great Good Place, said, places essential to the political processes of democracy. So 25 years ago, I not only showcased the work of Robert Putnam as ALA president, I also published Libraries and Democracy. So thank you. It's exactly 25 years since that book came out. In that book, I talked about the history and many other aspects. It was a collected work. I didn't write all of the book. But I did, there's lots of great quotes in there about democracy. One by Oliver Garceau, who wrote in the Public Library and the Political Process, from its beginning, the library has been closely connected with the American conception of democratic progress. So I would say not only from its beginning, but even before its beginning, because I'm going to take you back just for a moment to 18th century, early 18th century Philadelphia. My family's from Philly, so it's very near and dear to my heart celebrating Philadelphia this year and this morning. So in the fall of 1727, Benjamin Franklin and a group of his friends founded something called the Junto Club, also known as the Leather Apron Club, in Philadelphia. Right just a couple of blocks from where my mother was born, exactly 2 centuries later. The 12 members were tradesmen and artisans who met Friday evenings to discuss issues of morals, politics, and natural philosophy. In other words, they met to discuss the issues of the day. So he and his Junto Club officially founded a library, probably the first public library, as part of their discussions. They called it the Library Company. They founded it on July 1st, 1731, 45 years almost to the day before the Declaration of Independence was signed, just a few blocks away from the club or the company. And I might add, that company still exists today. You can go and visit it. So the idea to create this lending library started with the club members bringing in books to share with others and consult them during their weekly discussions of issues of the day. So rather than bringing the books back every time, that was a lot, it was cumbersome to have to haul them back and forth, the members agreed to keep the books in the meeting room so that all members would benefit from them and that they could then begin borrowing and taking them home to read, creating the idea of the first subscription library. So books from this Franklin's Library and the Junto Club's collection, I might add, served as the sources for the delegates of the First Continental Congress in September 1774, thereby fueling the debates that led to the Declaration of Independence. So this library had a really important place in the development of our democracy. So as we consider the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, it's worth noting that from their inception, public libraries were formed to facilitate dialogue and democratic discourse, starting with Franklin's Junto Club in 1727. So a very proud history for us to celebrate. So a century later, towns in New England started establishing public libraries, first in Peterborough, New Hampshire in 1833, and then in Boston in 1848, which founded their library on the democratic principle of providing free knowledge to all and hailed it as a palace of the people, and that palace is still very available today. So by the late 19th century, public libraries expanded to become the educational process where the schools left off, and by conducting a people's university, a wholesome, capable citizenry would be fully skilled in the conduct of a democratic life. And that's a quote from Sidney Ditzian, who was a library historian. So, nearly 100 years later, Julius Rosenwald, some of you may know that name, he was president of Sears Roebuck in Chicago, and Booker T. Washington established a fund to build 5,000 schools and 10,000 libraries for African Americans in the South. North Carolina, I'm proud to say, led the way, with the Rosenwald Fund supporting the building of over 800 schools in 93 of your counties, far more than any other state. Now, as civic scholar Harry Boyd describes them, these Rosenwald libraries and schools became citizenship schools, whose key organizers, Jeans teachers, and these Jeans teachers who led these schools were funded by a grant from Anna T. Jeans, a wealthy Quaker woman from none other than Philadelphia. Philadelphia again. And these teachers taught habits, practices, and skills essential for democratic renewal. The Jeans teachers organized civic leagues, instrumental to the civil rights movement and the development of a generation of leaders, including such famous civil rights leaders as John Lewis, Maya Angelou, and Medgar Evers, among many, many Black leaders who had attended these schools and became inspired to really use civic skills in promoting civil rights and being good citizens in their communities. So after World War II, libraries helped Americans understand the meaning of their democratic traditions and take action on issues of local concern. ALA launched the American Heritage Project, where local libraries hosted discussion groups about democracy and free speech, envisioning libraries as guardians of democracy and freedom. The same year, ALA distributed election information and organized discussion groups and other activities to increase voter turnout, offering citizens, quote, an experience of democracy as well as a consideration of it. So we have a long history from way back in the early 18th century of being places for dialogue. So after the 52 election, librarians began turning more attention to other issues, though, as major demographic shifts and social upheaval left Americans less familiar and trusting of their neighbors. Paralleling the pattern described by Robert Putnam in Bowling Alone, libraries stopped focusing on issues around democracy and civic life for close to half a century. Toward the end of the 20th century, though, a renewal of interest in civic life, including by Robert Putnam, led the rise of citizen-led dialogues with deliberative forums sponsored by groups like the National Issues Forums and the Kettering Foundation, the sponsor of the National Issues Forums, actually helped support the development of an ALA public policy institute to start teaching librarians how to convene these forums. And we started convening them in places like Des Moines and Virginia Beach, Johnson County, Kansas, and here at Rutgers in New Jersey. So, can libraries actually revive our America's civic culture? So, the theme of our day. So, here's a lot of libraries claiming that libraries save democracy. So, we shall see, right? So, as the national policy ground shifts, we must hearken back to the fact that our essential strength as libraries remains our long history supporting democratic discourse and our persistent local appeal. We are there in our local communities. As we learned, and those communities can be on campus, in schools, and locally. So all kinds of communities we support, as we've heard about your communities this morning. So as we learned right after the 24 election in Highland Park, the public still loves and supports libraries. Democracies need libraries as trusted third spaces conducive to democratic discourse, where citizens can talk and work together in a comfortable and welcoming space in town, at school, and on campus. So now we're on to America's 250th anniversary on July 4th, offering us a real milestone. But it also offers us a rare opportunity not just to look back, but also to act. If we want to renew the habits of citizenship that sustain our democracy begun half a century before America's independence, we need more than reflection. We need shared civic experiences, opportunities to listen, question, and engage across difference. In other words, we need to reawaken the habits that lead to civic bonds. And so, how do we as libraries join America's 250th? Well, it's, I think, a time for us to begin again. To begin again as libraries, we must use the moment to play a key role in creating and strengthening our civic culture. We can use this anniversary to help rebuild and take action on a set of shared concerns about our communities. So to do that, though, we need to get more engaged. Some of us are quite engaged, but to make a difference, we need to engage deeply in the civic life of our communities, which means turning outward and being part of our communities, like Highland Park had to while it was closed for so many years. It means that we need to move up what the International Association for Public Participation, or IAP2, spectrum indicates, from informing on the left of your screen to involving to empowering people. And there's lots of ways that you can move up the spectrum if you're not already further up. Here's how one group focusing on libraries actually took the spectrum and mapped out how to apply it in libraries. But essentially, it's about demonstrating that libraries can move from the listening stage, which is a good thing to do, but to more of the acting in collaborative ways stages of engaging in our communities. And I will make these slides available. You probably can't even read what's on here, but you can take a closer look later. So how do we do this? Well, first we can start by cultivating our civic commons. We have these wonderful spaces that are available for civic purposes. Some of you may know Eric Kleinberg's work. He's a sociology professor at NYU, where I spent most of my career, but he wasn't there yet. He wrote a book called Palaces for the People. He's spoken around the library world a lot, so you may have seen him. And he talked about how common spaces can repair our fractious and polarized civic life. And he contends that the library is one of those places where we get our earliest lessons about what it means to be part of a community and the kind of rights and obligations that that entails. Now, also speaking out on these issues is Sean Michael Hallman, who you may also know. He's recently written a book called Meet Me at the Library, which I hope you've had a chance to read. And he sees the library as an active piece of civic infrastructure, which includes the places, relationships, and institutions that help people build trust, solve problems, access opportunities, and practice life together. It shapes whether people feel connected or isolated, informed or manipulated, visible or unseen, empowered or resigned. Now, on the back of Sean Michael's book is a blurb from Eric Liu, another Eric, who is the CEO of Citizenship University out in Seattle, who suggested that there are no better gardeners of our democracy than public libraries. A librarian knows how to seed and feed the civic imagination. Read this book, then go forth and garden. Our democracy is depending on us, which I think is a wonderful way to think about ourselves. So what else can we do? Well, we can build libraries as civic hubs. I'm sure your libraries are doing something, at least a little bit, if not a lot, to become a civic hub, undertaking all kinds of activities that build civic life in your community, from learning about government and your civic world, to convening dialogues, to countering mis and disinformation. Here I'm showing a clip from the Democracy Truth Project, which is a project between the League of Women Voters and ALA related to voting, and then my own publication, Smart Voting Starts at Your Library. So lots of things we can do as a civic hub. We can also convene public forums, which is something that I really stress, going back to that role of libraries as a place for safe but brave dialogue in our communities, places where people can have discussions about contentious issues, even if it's about materials they don't like on our shelves, and allow people to share stories and perspectives. So pictured in this slide are several examples of libraries bringing people together around community dialogues. And here's another one that is very current. It's called the American Conversation Project for libraries. It was just put together to help libraries celebrate America 250 during what it calls Civic Season, starting next month. And so that it's a way for local libraries to share stories, listen deeply, and strengthen the bonds that hold us together in concert with libraries. And this project is part of a national project, but focused specifically on getting libraries involved. So you can sign up now. It's a great opportunity for you to do just one more thing related to the upcoming American 250 celebration.
I just want to jump in quickly and say we have about 10 minutes left. So
Okay.
folks in the audience, please start thinking about the questions that you would like to ask. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. So as the nation faces a growing civic knowledge gap, libraries can play a critical role in advancing what Henry Milner, who wrote a book on civic literacy, said is the knowledge and ability of citizens to make sense of their world and to act as competent citizens. Lots we can do in that arena. In fact, a lot of us are already doing it. Academics and school libraries are doing a lot of work around media and information literacy. So how do we take what we're already doing and apply it to civic literacy skills, including skills to make sure we can still have some truth around facts and that support our democracy. So this is going on around the country in all different ways. First on campus. This is a slide with many different national initiatives to try to promote more practicing democracy on campus. At the top is the Institute for Citizens and Scholars, featuring Rutgers' former president, very handsome man. So presidents of universities are leading the charge, as are all-in campus campus democracy challenge for community colleges, ASCU for state universities, Campus Compact, lots of groups out there doing this work. I just participated in a webinar with Leslie Garvin, who some of you may know from NC Campus Engagement, a potential partner for you that we will talk about in a few minutes. This is what one of those leaders had to say about academic libraries. He called them citizenship centers, more relevant now than ever in history. Across the country, academic libraries are jumping in, doing all kinds of exciting activities from William Patterson University here in New Jersey, um, giving credits for civic engagement badges to the University of Illinois libraries, government information librarians, deepening civic inquiry on campus. So at the community level, we've got lots of, at the community school level, we've got lots of groups functioning as well, from iCivics to the National Council for the Social Sciences, which several years ago adopted its new 3C framework for learning about social studies that focuses on citizenship, that third C. iCivics was started by Sandra Day O'Connor and uses uh, video games and other technology to promote civic learning. And finally, there's a slide from an NC State conference in the School of Education on the need for lifelong learning and democracy. So lots of opportunities. We have school librarians that are jumping in. Here's one in Nashville, where the librarian has launched Project Civ, where diverse students learn how to discuss controversial issues in civil dialogues. And so what about in our communities in general? If you're in a public library, there's lots of groups out there that really like working with libraries, from the National Issues Forums to Everyday Democracy to Braver Angels and the American Conversation Project. Here's some examples of libraries doing their thing. One is the New York Public Library, having dialogues on participatory budgeting. The St. Louis County Library, which won the prestigious Klein Community Impact Prize this year, strengthening its community ties by offering civil dialogues. And Rochester, New York, hosting a variety of people, including police officers and youth leaders, in concert with other groups, including the University of Rochester's Democracy Center. So, and I don't want to leave this example off because I really love this example. And the person who heads up the Queensborough Public Library, I was his mentor. So I'm so proud of seeing that they are offering a leadership training initiative, which equips residents with the knowledge and skills to serve in different community roles and really prepares them to be a pipeline for community leadership. So I hope you will think of ways you can partner. Here's lots of possibilities in North Carolina. So there's all these national groups that I mentioned, but there's also lots of local groups. So here's some of them that you might know about, others you may not know about, but we've got another poll. Which ones are you thinking of joining? I might add that all of these groups I found, you probably have other groups that you know about that are doing work in North Carolina. One that I work with, the Harwood Institute, has worked extensively in Alamance County and just came out with a second report about Alamance. And I know librarians there have been involved with that work. And they're just about to start coaching in Rockingham County in North Carolina. So lots of really good things going on. So we'll let you sort of mark up to 3 of these organizations to see who you might be partnering with, get a better sense of what's going on already, perhaps, or who you're thinking of partnering with in North Carolina. So we will do this quickly because we don't have a lot of time left. But hopefully you're already thinking of possibilities, even if you haven't checked them. So, Sophie, can we get our results?
Yes, let's see. I'll try to share them, and if we can't see them, I'll read out the top winners here. And some results are still coming in here. Can you all see the results, or shall I read them? Well, I'll read them anyway. It looks like the NC Rural Center is in the lead with about 59% of folks
Right.
saying they'd love to work with them, followed by Campus Compact, followed by the NC Advancing Civic Engagement, NC Civics Coalition, all in Campus Democracy Challenge, and pretty much all of these got some interest from our respondents.
And I might add, many of them are already working in your state, even though you may not be familiar with them. So, okay, so very exciting results. I'm glad to hear your interest in all this. So, so one of the things that I think is important for us to do, and I know that you have this key concern in your strategic plan for NC Live, is telling your story. And in this case, your civic story. So libraries are doing this work every day in every community around America, but often very quietly. In fact, maybe too quietly. The challenge is that much of this work remains underseen. And to many, or too many, I should say, libraries are seen as book lenders rather than as engines of resilience, trust, and democratic possibility. So, how do we change our image to be more of this very positive kind of democratic, community focused institution? Well, we also need to shift the discourse right now away from a narrative about libraries in crisis, particularly related to book banning. And I know it's a serious problem, particularly probably in some of your communities, but to libraries as essential institutions, agents of positive community change that bridge differences, not create more differences. So, how do we shift that frame? So I encourage you to showcase what's unique about your community for America 250 and beyond. This is a great moment for you. And to make your civic work more visible on your websites and other communications. And I will tell you, when you're trying to pull examples out, it is really hard to find them on your website. So think about that. So, but I know that some of you might find this topic challenging to talk about in your communities. So you can think of Talking Bridgie, which is a survey that's done every 2 years by the Philanthropy for Active Civic Engagement, or PACE. And they conduct these studies about using language strategically to sustain connection. It's not a list of good or bad words. It is grounded in how Americans actually perceive civic language today. So the good news is your top word is also their top word, community. Um, they've also found evidence that, believe it or not, in the last 2 years, many of the core civic terms are becoming more bridgy, not less. Terms like community, freedom, belonging, liberty, citizen, civility, and democracy even. Now, I'm only showing you part of the matrix. There's lots of more words, but that's all I could fit on the slide. So here's a quick poll. Which terms are most bridgy to you? And leave you with a positive impression. You can mark up to 3, and we'll see. We probably know what number 1's going to be, but we'll see which terms you feel most comfortable with compared to the terms that were surveyed nationally. Okay, so we'll do this fast because we don't have a lot of time left. So, Sophie, who are the winners of this raffle for the best terms?
All right, everyone answer quickly. I'm going to end it right now. Here we go. All right, well, hopefully you can see it, but if not, I'll tell you the top term this time was in fact community, followed by belonging, and it looks like diversity, freedom, and civic engagement all got pretty strong responses as well.
Wow, very interesting. So that's what you're most comfortable with. So use the words you're most comfortable with to tell your story. So what is the sphere of influence we have? What space does your library occupy in your community? So we're going to do a quick poll again. I think this is the last of our polls, so we'll make this quick. So what kind of role does your library play? You can do multiple choices here. So quickly, let's see, how do you fit into your community? Are you a connector, a convener, a partner, a capacity builder, a storyteller, catalyst, an archivist of shared history, whatever? So mark your favorites and we'll see what you think what you think the role is of your library in your community. And remember, we're not just talking about local communities, we're talking about communities on campus, communities in schools, communities wherever we are. Okay, Sophie, what do we got this time?
Right. I'm closing it down. Get in your last answers. Here we go. Looks like our top results are resource at 86%. And then we've also got pretty high responses for partner, connector, and archivist of shared history.
Okay, so we didn't do so well on catalysts. Well, hopefully we'll make you more catalysts after today. So, so what do we need to do then to revive our civic culture? What will it take? Well, we need to be participatory. We learned that in Highland Park, and I could go into a long story about how we weren't before COVID. We're very local and we should keep our focus locally, especially at a time when it's really hard to deal perhaps at the national level. We're pluralistic. We're very inclusive. Um, how can we be more relational? And finally, belief in ourselves. This is such an important one. So I will tell you, after I was president of ALA, somebody asked me, what was the hardest thing you did as president of ALA? And I had to think hard about it because I'd never thought about it. And out of my mouth came helping librarians believe in ourselves. And this is an area that we have so much to offer, but it's real hard for us to believe in ourselves and that we do these amazing things. So together, though, we can reimagine, revive, and rebuild our civic culture across North Carolina, across the country, and across the world. And I've worked worldwide on these issues, from Russia to Eastern Europe to South America to Asia. And I will tell you, we really make a difference in this arena. So looking ahead, I want to stress that our civic culture needs your help urgently and desperately. We need to cultivate a culture of connection. You recognize that. It makes a difference. It made a difference in Highland Park, and I'm sure it's making a real difference in your communities as well. And tell that civic story, not just how people found what they wanted at the library, but what a difference it makes in your community. Reframe the argument from a fight against to what we're actually for, bridge divides rather than widen them, forge partnerships with unexpected partners, and hopefully I found a few more for you today. Reach and engage different kinds of people, kind of find the people that are the least easy to find in your community, uncover a sense of common purpose, and reclaim and contribute to reviving our civic culture. So, as some have said, join together to become civic agents of a new promissory note at this crucible moment. So, with that, I'm going to close back with my friend Robert Putnam, who is just an amazing person. There's a great movie about him that they just showed at an Association of Research Library Executive Institute that some of you may have been at in October. Just as one cannot restart a heart with one's remote control, one cannot jumpstart Republican citizenship without direct face-to-face participation. Citizenship is not a spectator sport. So thank you very much. I'm going to leave you with lots more to learn. First, the special issue of Library Quarterly that I did came out in January 2024, Reimagining the Civic Role of Libraries, where I tell some of these stories. ALA has amazing resources, and their tagline is because our divided nation needs conversation more than ever. Here's one of those resources from the Harwood Institute and ALA. Communities have challenges, libraries can help. These are all free. ALA has a brand new resource. I was an advisor on this project called Leading Polarizing Conversations. It's a great guide in how to work through these differences in our communities. And they have put together an e-learning